Thank you all for joining this session. People-powered philanthropy, how collective giving is protecting democracy in Michigan. Please note, closed captioning is available and can be enabled at the bottom of your Zoom screen. My name is Kaisen Buntuwong, pronouns ze, he, gender queer, Asian American male, black hair, white shirt. Few patterns on my shirt as well, standing in front of red background with the We Give Summit logo. I am the Director of Development and Partnerships at Philanthropy Together, which is a global initiative to grow and strengthen the collective giving field. So I think a lot of you know that already, but you know that this topic is super important and why you're here, particularly protecting our democracy is just super urgent and critical. So our speakers and organizations that are joining today have been really working on the ground, like I said, in Michigan, to really ignite civic engagement. So we hope you stay present. We hope that you engage in conversation in the chat. We hope you share your feedback with a quick poll at the end. And of course, to keep things fun, this wouldn't be the We Give Summit if there wasn't any fun. We're doing a random drawing at the end of the session, just so that we can award one of you a book from one of our amazing speakers in the We Give Summit. So the winner will be announced at the end of the session. So please stick around and stay with us to know if you're selected. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce today's moderator and leader extraordinaire, my teammate, Taisha Wilson.
Oh, thank you, Kaisen. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us for this session. I'm super excited about it. And we're going to have a great, rich conversation about our democracy and civic engagement on all the things, the great things that are happening in Michigan. Like many of you, I should start off with my own framing. Like many of you, I am a part of a collective giving group. And my giving circle is called Heritage Giving Fund. We are the first Black giving circle established here in the state of Texas. And we fund grassroots organizations that are led by Black women who serve women and girls. And I share that because like a lot of giving circles or just collective giving groups, we are not only are moving money, but we engage and have been thinking very richly and deeply about beyond the dollar and how we can better activate our members civically to become more engaged in community, and just so that we can create a more amplified impact in our community. And so, y'all, civic engagement, I'm preaching to a choir because we're all philanthropists here and we're all about this life of serving community, but civic engagement is so very important. It is a means in which as individuals, we, through collective action, can influence the larger civil society. And that's not, civic engagement is not just about creating better policies, but also about reinvigorating democratic practices, right? And so that said, my personal opinion, I'm biased like a lot of you all, but collective giving is one of the most powerful tools, y'all, that we have to activate people to become more civically engaged and to move policy. And we're going to talk about that today. So whether your collective giving group is political or not, don't be scared, okay? We live in a democracy and we all have a responsibility to safeguard our democracy, to protect our personal freedoms, right? And improve the lives of our local communities. And so we got some work to do and that work starts today. That being said, from failures in power grids to extreme weather, y'all, mass shootings, it's just a lot of stuff. We have a lot of things going on in our communities. The world feels on fire, but there is hope in us. There is hope in humanity. And we know that through individual actions, they matter, but in order for us to have effective change, it is going to require us to work very collaboratively and take mass action from the people everywhere. And so as Gloria Walton shared, she was our keynote yesterday, right now it's all about relationships and listening deeply and sharing what we're learning. And that's what we're doing here at We Give Summit. We want to see and hear from Melissa and Isaiah about what they're doing in Michigan and how we can model that in our communities today. And get some inspiration. So that said, in conversation with me today, I am so honored. Melissa, Isaiah, welcome, you two. Isaiah is the president and CEO of the Community Foundation of Greater Flint, and Melissa Walker, she is the executive director of the States Project. And they are with us today for us really to think very boldly, y'all, on how we as givers can really activate our collective giving strategies and embed activism to go beyond the dollar to shift power and move policy. And so with that, before we jump into the conversations, Isaiah, Melissa, hey.
Hey.
I would like for y'all to, I mean, everyone knows who y'all are, by the way, but if you can, why don't y'all just give us a little overview yourself and just a little bit about your organization, your values, and your focus areas. So in case folks don't know.
Melissa, you can kick us off.
Oh, thanks, Isaiah. I'll go ahead then. So my name is Melissa Walker. I am the head of Giving Circles at the States Project. And my career before 2016 was that I wrote young adult and middle grade novels. So I came to this work down a different path than many, but I think that, you know, we all kind of share this this moment in history when we are watching threats to our democracy, when we are watching a moment when we all really need to stand up and work together to move our country in a direction that reflects our values. So the States Project is an organization that focuses exclusively on state legislatures. Our electoral work focuses on winning governing majorities in state capitals by making state legislative campaigns more effective and better funded. And we do that because we believe that state legislatures are the strongest force for change in our country. And we'll hear a little bit about that in this panel. But I want to say that, you know, the way that we do it is really important too, because we really fuel our electoral program through giving circles, people who come together with their friends, families, and networks and understand that this focus on state legislatures, the foundations of democracy, not where the spotlight always is, not Washington, D.C., but in these 50 mini Congresses is really a great opportunity for folks to dig in and make actual tangible change happen. So that's how we do it. That's why we do it. And just really excited to dig in today.
Thank you, Melissa.
And my name is Isaiah Oliver. I serve as president and CEO, as Taisha said, of the Community Foundation of Greater Flint. And I often describe that as saying that it means I lead an organization that's focused on engaging people in this world of philanthropy. Where at its core, we believe we're at our best as a community when everybody has the tools that they need to give their best to making community a better place to live in and work in and contribute to. And so when we start talking about the time and talent and treasure and testimony and relationships that are necessary to move the work forward, or the social, moral, reputational, intellectual, and financial capital that's necessary to move the world forward, we start thinking about systems that are uniquely positioned to do that well. And so leading a community foundation where we've got 600 something odd unique component funds focused on doing work spread across 30,000 unique donors from all 50 states and 15 different countries. And that's a little bit of the how, and I'll talk a little bit about the why, because what we do today at the Community Foundation of Greater Flint is different than what we did 9 years ago or 7 years ago when our community wrestled through a water crisis that had 100,000 people, 10,000 kiddos, 0 to 6, impacted by lead and toxins in their water. We operate very differently because of that experience. I'll tell a quick story and then we'll talk quite a bit about this in detail later on. So during the water crisis, we were buried in work. Again, we had funds set across, we had licenses to solicit in all 50 states. So we were doing lots of work on the development end of the work. And I came home after a long day of doing work, and I've got 4 kiddos. At the time I had 3. And I walked through the door and my baby girl is screaming at the top of her lungs. My wife is downstairs in the lower level washing some clothes, and I yell at my middle girl and say, "Hey, could you go grab me some milk out of the freezer and throw some water in the microwave?" Because as a dad, I go right into dad mode when I walk through. So we throw some water in the microwave, put it on 3 minutes. My daughter gives me the milk. My wife comes up the stairs. She puts the laundry basket down. She goes into the living room. She yells at my oldest daughter, and she says, "Hey, grab me a diaper." She rips the diaper open. Immediately, my baby daughter stops crying. She looks at my middle daughter. She says, "Where's your dad?" She says, "He's still sitting by the microwave waiting on it to go off." In that moment, I realized 2 things. One, there was a fully operating system happening in my house, and I wasn't part of it. But I also realized in that moment, we feel like we know everything. We've got it all together. We understand how to do 2 and 4 folks, but we're not always willing when things get tough, get in a crunch, to do it. And I think what we realized at the Community Foundation of Greater Flint, through our water crisis experience, through a global health pandemic, through a world where we've had to wrestle through race and systemic racism and being thoughtful post George Floyd about what philanthropy does in that space, that we don't have all of the answers, and that we have to get more proximate with the folks that are in the systems doing the work in order to really see effective change. So I'm looking forward to the conversation. And again, looking forward to deep diving some of what we've done and how we've done it, but really exploring why we've shifted the way we engage in philanthropy.
Thank you for sharing it, Isaiah. I think that's a perfect segue into our first question, y'all, because we're just going to get right into it. When we talk about, we don't know all the solutions, but Melissa, and what you all are doing at the States Project, y'all have outcomes. Y'all have been very effective with your work on the ground in Michigan. Specifically, as a matter of fact, I recall you sharing that your giving circles were instrumental with helping to secure the Democratic trifecta in Michigan for the first time since like 1983. Folks want to know how are giving circles doing that? How can collective giving, like giving circles, activate people beyond the dollar to shift that power and to move policy?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, giving circles really are about community engagement. And of course, we have political giving circles, so that becomes civic engagement as well. And the first step in all of this is understanding that most folks don't have eyes on state legislatures. Many people I talk to do not have any idea who goes to their state capital for them. And no shade, that is something that all of our country needs to work on, because we're not really taught to look in that direction. But those are the folks who are controlling all of these kitchen table issues, from education funding to environmental policy, to healthcare, to civil rights, to abortion, to the cores of our democracy. Voting rights are decided by your state capital. And of course, gerrymandering, the drawing of the district lines that decide who goes to Congress, often decided in the state capital as well. So we have to look at these power centers. And when Giving Circle leaders come to the States Project and join us in this work, they really enter a political fluency building program. So they start to look at, okay, where are power shifts possible? How can we help make this happen? And also, what's going on in my own community? Who goes to my state capital for me? We have Giving Circle leaders who are all over the country. So while they are engaging in the places where we see electoral targets to try to shift power, they are also learning more about their own representatives and their own communities and how to engage with them. And I think that outcome can be incredibly important because, first of all, everyone walks with more power when they have that kind of knowledge. But they also walk with more power when they're walking alongside their friends and their neighbors and their family members. And that's what the Giving Circle model does for people. It helps them understand how to bring attention and resources to something that they care about. And once someone does that once and learns how to do it, they know they can do it again. And they walk taller and prouder and with more confidence in their community. So one of our goals with our Giving Circles, of course, is to raise the electoral dollars that help us do things like make that power shift in Michigan possible. And we've been working there since 2018, so 6 years on that power shift. And it has been an incredible thing to watch. But also, every Giving Circle leader who's been with us in doing this work has really learned that power of bringing attention and resources to something they care about, so that I've seen people not only engage their Giving Circle, but also tend to their local school a little better, make sure their corner's just a little tighter because they know how to bring attention and resources when they care about something in their own communities as well. So I've watched people individually and collectively learn how much power they really have. And that power's been there all along, but it is something that we try to help uncover with our Giving Circle program. And the electoral shifts are, of course, our main goal. And what's happened in Michigan has just been wild and incredible because we were able to help flip the state Senate and the state House to create a Democratic trifecta in Michigan, meaning that the governor's mansion and then both of those state chambers are now in Democratic hands. That has allowed some incredible policy changes, which I think we'll get into a little later.
I love that you're lifting up the power piece, because I think you're right. For a lot of folks that enter into philanthropy and even just Giving Circles, a lot of times that's their first, their first step into civic engagement. And what we do know with Giving Circle members is that Once you are in that collaborative giving experience, you're more likely to become more civically engaged. And that looks like a variety of different ways in how you use your social capital and your influence and really just activating your power. So I love that you mentioned that. And Isaiah, it puts me to mind, even just with what you all are doing at the Community Foundation, y'all definitely know how to center your people and to help them to activate their power. You want to share a little bit more about how you all are centering and activating your people beyond the dollar, specifically on that social capital piece, because I know that's something that you and I had talked about.
So yeah, we've talked about it before. I tell you, part of it is really leveraging privilege. Folks don't like to talk about privilege, earned privilege or unearned privilege, right? But it's about leveraging privilege. What I know is that charity isn't enough to fix all of the issues that exist in our community, to plug all of the holes. You probably heard the term charity begins at home. We often say generosity begins at home. Charity begins with the IRS, and we help people to navigate charity and how to give responsibly, right? With all of the tax incentives that exist. And so how do we leverage 35 years of charity in the Genesee County community, or 107 years of community foundations existing all over this country? After you've given away millions of dollars, when you call people, they answer the phone. When you convene folks, they come to the table. So how do you now, after you've given so much, begin to leverage the privilege that comes along with it? Amplifying resident voices, authentic community engagement, where you're really being proximate with folks and listening with an ear to hear them, right? Not just to share what you think is right. Convening and advocacy and lobbying, really things that community foundations can do uniquely. Collecting and disseminating data with the resources that you have in order to have larger or greater impact, and really marshaling resources beyond just philanthropy. Because what we know in the state of Michigan, and Melissa will tell you, we got an $86 billion budget. The Community Foundation of Greater Flint gives away around $10 million a year. We got over 200 something odd volunteers who help us to make those grant making decisions. So democracy is in play and the 10 million in giving, but how are we building relationships that way we can leverage not only the privilege we have, but the financial resources that are available at the state in Lansing, in our case. Because another thing we know is that relationships develop at the speed of trust, and trust takes time. And time is the one thing that you don't have on your side when you're trying to move something through on behalf of or in partnership with folks who are marginalized the most, that haven't had access and quite frankly don't have the relationships. And so we do what we do because we live in a world of privilege, operating in philanthropy. And so now there comes a time in your life. I mean, my mom used to say, faith without works is dead, right? She'd also say there comes a time in your life where you have to take everything you've been given and do something and be strategic about that thing that you're doing. And what we're living into right now is really listening closely, listening deeply, listening to the feelings beneath the words, engaging folks that are in our community that don't have access to the table. And when they do, it's not in a wingback chair, it's in a fold-out chair. We fold it up when they leave and put it back in the corner, right? So how are we making sure we're creating space at the table for those voices to be there and be heard? Sometimes we talk about giving voice to the voiceless. Now, they always had a voice, you just wasn't listening. And so how are we listening better and listening deeper and listening different? And then how are we showing that we're listening through our actions? And so that's what we're attempting to live into and live through at the Community Foundation. And we'll talk a little bit more about the details later, but the why has been extremely important for us as we really begin to deep dive some of the deep issues that exist in our urban community.
Relationships. I read an article recently, and they were saying how creating solutions together was listed as one of the top 5 trends in philanthropy this year. And rightfully so, right? That's literally what you just talked about so much, about that deep listening piece and the relationship, the importance of how you all are centering that. And so this trend, it's not a trend, it's a lifestyle, it's us. We're doing this work of a more collaborative and collective way of how we're going about philanthropy. And with the foundations, especially with you all being anchor institutions and what that looked like, of being able to activate people and using their time, talent, treasure, and talents and all that good stuff. Where we see the greatest trend with this push for relationship building and collaboration is really to bring folks up, is to bring their voices. Like you said, Isaiah, they've been having a voice, but how can we create these spaces and places? I mean, to work together strategically through those partnerships to create change. And so I know that just as we're thinking about just relationships, we're talking about strategic partnerships and such like that. Your foundation has been very, very from basically from like the water crisis you all have had. One of the things that have stood out to me was how you all have been able to leverage these partnerships, especially, and also just reimagining the role, the foundation's role in philanthropy and forming these multi-sector partnerships to address the city's need through initiatives like your community leadership fund, specifically, Isaiah. And so as we all, as organizers and community leaders, really think deeply about ways and how we can establish better strategic partnerships with folks like Melissa, as you said, our elected officials and like other community partner, what does that look like? How can we really leverage that change? How can we really leverage and establish strategic partnerships that really create a very sustainable and profound way that creates local change?
And that was for me, right?
Yes.
Okay, got it. So our community leadership fund is really focused on getting resources that allow us to really innovate and replicate, and then ultimately demonstrate some things. That way we can scale interventions that work at the local level, interventions that are localized and, quite frankly, directly reflective of community voice. And so during the global health pandemic, we started a task force focused on racial disparities or differences in the numbers. During our conversations, we had to have some initial dollars to throw into that. So we had a donor advisor who gave some resources to instigate the establishment of that fund. That fund went into a broad fund that was focused on community leadership, really tapping into more than just grant making. But what does it mean to bring together, in our case, 26 leaders from across not only socioeconomic differences, but really folks across sectoral differences. And so business, banking, and workforce development, and faith, and government, and philanthropy, really bringing those folks together to have conversations about what it means to look at the differences in the numbers and what systemic inequities are perpetuating the differences that we see in the numbers. And then how are we going to collectively respond to that? That isn't just a grant. That is really operational dollars that are focused on making sure that we're elevating appropriately the voices of folks that usually aren't part of the solution. And so while that sounds like a small thing to do, it really benefits us as an organization, but quite frankly, benefits community in ways that we lift that community voice through the process of really ideating together or co-creating a future where we can all really contribute to it together. We also did some similar work to that during the water crisis. We learned from community members that were engaged in the work that not only was their water brown, but there was some science related to what was happening to 0-6-year-olds. That lead was storing itself in the tissues and the organs and leaching out over 2 decades. And so what does it mean for us to not only be able to prepare to respond immediately to the immediate needs of 0-6-year-olds impacted by a crisis, but for the 2 decades following? And so how do we establish a fund that allows the flexibility for community to navigate the challenges and new innovations that may come about? And that requires some trust. And so again, we're leveraging a privilege or some privilege of trust that we have in community, but for community benefit, and in a way that we're listening to community and hearing what community is thinking. So it's not just about the grant making dollars that go out. One grant, cause effect philanthropy. You fund the grant, and then 30 days after that 1-year period, you get a report back and talk about all those amazing things you've done. Quite frankly, the problem now is that we can't just attribute. It's more about our contribution than it is attribution. The Community Foundation didn't do anything. We're working in partnership with a host of individuals across sectors and across geographies to see to it that our community gets everything that it needs. And our way of being, our way of engaging is very different than we have before, because the way we measure impact, the way we describe and tell the stories, what has the Community Foundation done? What have they done in partnership? My mom would always tell me when I was younger, dancing isn't always about being out front, but it's not always about being in the back. Sometimes it's about being in the middle. You got to figure out in the dance, in the relationship building process, how are you leading? How are you showing up? How are you leaning in? And how are you supporting that partner that you have in the dance? And so we've been really thoughtful about how we support the partner that we're in the dance with. We've also been very thoughtful about who we're in the dance with. It's not a donor-driven kind of dance anymore. There are folks who have perspectives and love for the community that we serve that are not always in the dance. So how do we engage them in the dance? How do we allow them to lead? And how do we support them through the process?
I love that dance analogy. Melissa, what about you? Strategic partnerships. I know you all partner with, I mean, you have to, you're working with these state legislators and especially given just the, we have your giving. So it's just a lot of people that are involved, of course, with moving policy. And so, yeah, we'll love to know how, what that strategic partnerships look like and how, you know, for the state's project with your giving circles.
Absolutely. So I love that dance analogy too. We have a couple of partnerships. We have partnerships, of course, with our giving circles who choose the target state that they'd like to go into. So we have many giving circles that are focused on Michigan. And then our electoral work, our political team works in Michigan with the state caucuses. The state caucus is the entity in the state that is focused exclusively on the legislature. So that's the Michigan State House Caucus and the Michigan State Senate Caucus. Those are our partners on the ground. And it really is profound to focus on them because there is often a pull by stakeholders, by donors, even by in-state partners sometimes, or folks who maybe don't end up as in-state partners, to focus on big ticket races, right? Those top of the ticket races, those up ballot lines, because that's really where we are trained to look. But at the States Project, we believe that if you aren't exclusively focused on the legislature, then you can't do the state legislature well, because it is wild and unwieldy and it deserves its own attention, not a trickle down theory on like, well, if we work on this top of the ticket race, that'll hit the state ledge districts as well. We must focus from the ground up. The way that we fund our elections is upside down. We are trying to shine a chimney on a house with crumbling foundations. These foundations are state legislatures. This is really where we have to build. So that's why we focus there. And that's why our partners are the state caucus, because we have an aligned focus on the legislatures exclusively. And when we go into a state, we partner and align on target districts, the ones that we need to shift or defend in order to change the balance of power. Because we know that is the balance of power shift that creates profound change on the ground. And I want to say something a little bit about that, because I know I'll get into some policy stuff later that's going to be fun and exciting about what Michigan's been able to do. But I want to also highlight the fact that since we were able to shift the majorities in Lansing, it really has changed who's at the table, who has power. And so just some stats on the Michigan House majority. I won't share the Senate because it's probably too long, but on the Michigan House majority, but the previous majority was 25% women. Now the majority is 59% women. The previous majority was 0% BIPOC folks. It is now 32% BIPOC folks. The previous majority was 0% LGBTQ plus folks, and it is now 11% LGBTQ plus folks. And the thing is, some of those folks were already in the chamber in Lansing. They were already there, but they had no power. They did not have power when serving in the minority. We needed to help get them into the majority, because that's when they can change things. And by the way, that's when their constituents have real representation and power in the room. They always had a little representation, but it was a witnessing kind of representation. And now these folks are wielding the gavel. And that is really what we're focused on, that power shift. And the thing is that giving circles really start to walk down the path of understanding that with us, learning about it. Oh, but I love this candidate in this deep blue district. Well, guess what? They don't need us. You know, they don't need us. They're going to win. But you know what they need us for? To get them into the majority with this purple district over here. So let's shift power. Let's get everybody who has had a voice that hasn't been being heard because they didn't have the gavel into a place where they can actually shift policy. And the people who are closest to the problem are actually creating solutions. So we take our partnerships there very seriously, and we love it when we're able to put those partnerships into the power seat.
Oftentimes, I get asked, or just when I'm training giving circle leaders, or just in general, you know, folks want to know about the ways and how they can even go about establishing those strategic partnerships. And so I'm going to throw in an extra question, because I know building those relationships is hard and it takes time and it takes work. And so for the groups that are on here and the giving circle leaders on here that are like, I don't even know where to start. Like, how do I even get started with establishing, if I have a strategic partner in mind, with who I want to work with, what would y'all give up to them? Y'all have been so successful with establishing these strategic partnerships. I just want to make sure that folks at least can get just some best practices from you all with how y'all were even able to cultivate them to get y'all to yield these successful outcomes that you've shared today.
So I'm going to be quick. Mine is going to be easy.
Okay.
I didn't have to develop them as much because I've been leveraging privilege, the privilege of the organization that I represent. I will tell you, as a 42-year-old Black man from Flint, Michigan, if not in this position that I'm in right now, I'm not able to call up legislators and they just answer. I'm not able to influence the decisions that they make, right? And so I think as we talk about, there was a question in the chat that talked about power and the collective power. I think it is leveraging the collective power, right? When we start thinking about, again, the differences in the numbers are clear and everybody wants to describe themselves as a data-driven organization or a data-driven person or a data-driven legislature, right? If the numbers are suggesting that a group is being left behind consistently, we also know that there isn't enough money in the state's budget, and we know that there isn't enough money in charity to fix all of the problems. It's only logical that you focus the resources you have on closing the gap, but who can tell that story? And so I think partnership is important here because, again, relationships develop at the speed of trust. Trust takes time. And if I need to get something in front of someone before they approve a budget, which they're working on right now, they'll probably be through the Senate and actually to the House within a couple of weeks, and I haven't developed a relationship, I've got to lean on someone that has it. And I think that's where it's incumbent upon philanthropy to be thoughtful about the relationships that we have in the moment and how we're hearing and being conduits of information. We're not interpreting the information on behalf of others. We're being conduit. And in many cases, if we can, we're bringing those folks to the table to tell their own stories. And I think that's the opportunity, is really to lift up a narrative that hasn't been heard, to Melissa's earlier point, to an audience that is very different, very diverse, a lot different than it was before, in a better position to hear and relate because of their lived and professional experiences. And so how are we becoming bridges more than being advocates? I don't just need to be an advocate. That's when you're not in the room. But if I can bring you in the room and be a bridge between the folks who have influence and power to make decisions and autonomy to wield that power and the folks who have the lived experiences, my job is to be that bridge.
And I don't have much to add except to say that I think like the key word here is listening. Like partnerships are created through some real listening. And, just to give a parallel, one of our electoral interventions when we go into a state is really to encourage the candidates themselves to knock on doors. We monitor our candidates' door knocking numbers because the candidate listening to people in their community is first a really effective electoral tactic in terms of getting folks to persuaded to change to vote for that person. It's a field team is great for get out the vote, but the candidate themselves knocking on doors is the persuasion knock. It is the one that can cut through negative national environment, negative ads, negative things that are coming out, perhaps mailers, things like that. So absolutely listening on the doors is something that creates partnerships between candidates and their future constituents. It also happens to make them better representatives once they get into the Capitol because they have heard more members of their community. And I believe that when giving circles are looking for partnerships, one of the most important things is to really listen to the people they're considering partnering with and figure out places of alignment and places of trust. And exactly as Isaiah said, relationships definitely move at the speed of trust. And so really starting, I believe, on a listening path is the first step to building one.
Thank you. We are talking so much about trust and relationship, that deep listening and how that can help us to really be effective with going about our partnerships. I also think, in terms of like the organizations, when I know the commute from the outside, when folks are looking at organizations to partner with or who they can join, they're also looking at the language and how you all at the organizational level or explicitly or not talking about things like equity and trust and such like that. The community is also listening to you all as organizations to identify who they also want to align with. And I know one of the things that struck me out, like I really liked about y'all website, Isaiah, is that y'all have explicitly embedded equity in that anti-racism statements in your mission statement. That's when folks are looking for partnerships, like you're looking for shared values and alignment there. And so I want to talk a little bit more even about that, just how communities, how you all especially can work more effectively to really just build that trust. Because we understand that distrust right now is kind of at an all-time high with everyone being so polarized and on different sides. Like, how can we better establish that trust? And I know we've said things like deep listening and things like that, but I want to ensure that we are lifting up other tangible ways and how we can really revitalize our communities for a more sustained action that's centered and rooted in trust.
Yeah, I see. We often talk about this idea of private action, if you will, or private resources for public good, and that's what charity or philanthropy is. But we don't acknowledge the racial history of philanthropy and how it got here. So, what perspectives have been at the table, really making those decisions in the private, and who've decided what public good is, right? That demographic is shifting and changing too. I think there was a point in the chat that kind of talked about that. So what we've been thoughtful about doing is using this framework. It's called Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation, really to guide the way we do our work. Truth is really having an honest reckoning with the racial history, not only of our local community, but of our country, and how that impacts who we are today and how we become who we are today. The second part of that is really having an honest reckoning with who we are as a country, really in the real time, being thoughtful about how we, and if you watch Star Trek, they would say jettison the belief in the hierarchy of human value, really being thoughtful about how you go through debiasing processes that allow us to see one another as human beings. So before we start talking about the tough issues of race or marginalization or history, really having a conversation about the last time you smiled really big, the last time you smiled or you laughed really hard, really humanizing the experience. The last time you held a baby, how that made you feel, the last time you supported an elderly person in your community, a more seasoned person in your community, and how that made you feel. How did it make them feel? When's the last time someone listened your soul into life, right? The human experience. And then from there, we can begin to co-create a future where all of us and our full humanity can show up to make it a better place. And so with that as our framework, you enter into these tough conversations, and I'm going to quote my mom again because I do that. She would always say, eat chicken and throw away bones. I'm in a better position to take the meat of that conversation and throw away the stuff, because now I see you as a human being and I can engage you as a person. When we start talking about the racial history of this country, we are not taking it personal and talking about your grandma, your great grandma, and what happens. We're able to acknowledge that there are some earned privileges, like going to college and some other things, and there's some unearned privileges, like being a male, right? And I can own that those two things can be true at the same time, that there can be a conflict or a tension in the room and we can still address community issues together. And that has been the base of our work. And I will tell you the leadership responsibility that comes with that. My mom didn't say this. This was a Marty Linsky's quote. Marty Linsky would say, leadership is the art of disappointing your people at a rate they can absorb. So how do we lean into this space where we're disappointing people appropriately, not kicking them off the team? We're keeping them on the team. We're pushing them really hard to be part of the team. Shed some, one person would say, what are you willing to compromise about who you are to get to where you're trying to go? What it took to get us to these places isn't going to be the thing that's going to get us to move forward together. And so how are you compromising a bit of what brought you to the space to create space for other people to be part of the journey? And so we are excited about the work, but again, it's framed or rooted in this idea of truth, racial healing, and transformation.
Marissa.
Isaiah, you are tough to follow. I will say, what I just want to highlight some things that Isaiah said and talk about the ways that we work within some of that framework, because one of the things is like, we have to tell our stories. We absolutely have to talk about what's true for us. And I think giving circles are such a great model for that, because there are conflicts among giving circles. There are things to talk about and sort through, but it starts with a circle of people that you know. And that creates a space of trust right away. And then you bring in, okay, now we're going to work with the States Project and they work on political things. And let's now talk to them and create some trust. And I will tell you that when you work in politics, people are often about like, did you win? Did you win? Right? And there's a couple of things like, we are absolutely about those power shifts, and that is what we are going for. But I will tell you that when I started working on this in 2017, we were doing great. We had some great successes in 2017, 2018, 2019, flipping Virginia to become a blue trifecta. And it was incredible to watch those things. And in 2020, we kind of hit a brick wall and we did not achieve goals. And our community, took a minute and said, I don't know. I don't know if this works. I don't know. I don't think we won. And I took a minute and I ended up kind of bringing my full self, because I couldn't help it, to the meeting that we had right after that election, where I had to keep turning off my Zoom because I was like crying. And our political director called me after that and he said, are you going to go back to writing books now? Are you going to quit now? And I was like, well, no. And he said, well, you may not know this yet, but you fight and you lose and you fight and you lose and you fight and you lose and you fight and you win. But there's only one consistent part here. And I was like, the fight. And he said, that's right. And I carried that with me because it really shifted everything for me. And I worked to shift it with the Giving Circles too. We are in this for the fight. We are fighting for our democracy. We are fighting for our people. We are fighting for the rights of human beings in this country. And there is not an option to sit down on that win or lose measure. And so even though we have incredible victories to celebrate from 2022, especially in Michigan, I think it's really important to bring a holistic, long-term view to this and say, what are our wins along the way? And how do we win by just being in the fight? And when you're able to be vulnerable and talk about loss together and why it's important to carry on, that is when this work becomes really sticky. And that's when we know that we're in it to keep going together. And I think that's a really important thing, bringing our stories and our vulnerabilities and our crying on the Zoom sometimes.
That I was taking in what you're saying right now, because that really hits home to me personally. Yeah, we are humans first. And we have everything in my heart, and just listening to y'all today just confirms that we have everything that we need, everything, resources, people, all the ways, the ideas, the creative minds, the innovation. We have everything that we need to really create profound change and to really move our communities and get more people engaged, and for us to establish trust with one another. All of these things is just so important. And Isaiah, actually, I have a question. We have a question for you in the chat from Maya. Before I close out with our final question, I want to make sure I answer this. So Isaiah, how do you pour into yourself, and what is that community, and how does your community show up for you? I like that question, because really you all are doing such good work. So then the people want to know, how are you pouring into yourselves as leaders in this work, policy, moving folks, establishing those strategic partnerships? How are you pouring into yourself, and how does your community show up for you?
So a couple of things. One, I have an amazing team at the Community Foundation of Greater Flint.
Yeah.
Some of them are actually on the call, probably listening in and ready to tell me some things that I said well and some things that I didn't really say well, right? I got folks around me that I trusted, folks that would do the work. I think one thing that is empowering for me and my community is that I don't have to show up as Michael, as we talk about games, the games that we're playing, the win. I don't have to show up as Michael Jordan for my community in the ways that I thought I did before. And that's both empowering, and it gives me some space. I can show up as Dennis Rodman. My job is to just clear the boards and get it out to the guy in the open. That way he can hit the shot. I don't always have to hit the shot. And so I think when we start to understand the game that we're playing and the role that we play in the game and how that can shift over time, it gives you space to rest. It gives you space to do something very different than you've done before. We don't always have to be Kobe Bryant or Allen Iverson. I don't know if there's basketball fans on here. I'm hoping it's a couple. If not, I'm losing folks. But you don't always have to be the person to take the last shot or the first shot. Sometimes your role is to get rebounds and make sure that everybody's still in the game. Offensive rebounds, that way we can get off the defensive end of the game, right? A defensive end of the floor. I think we have to have some clarity of what our role is and how those roles may shift. That allows me to show up as dad when appropriately. That allows me to show up as husband when appropriately. It allows me to show up as the boss and also as a friend. And I think we are not a monolith as people, as leaders. And when people understand that as a leader, there's not a leadership monolith either, right? And so what is a leader and how does that leader show up today? I might show up tired today. That means I need a little bit of space. I'm also an introverted person. It may not show up on this call, right? But so I might need 15 or 20 minutes in between calls. And so how are we making sure we're giving people, thinking about centering equity, giving leaders what they need to show up their best, recognizing that we're all human beings in this fight together, and we're better together than we are apart. And so again, my community has been very supportive. Once my community realized, one, he's not looking to take the last shot, and he's not always looking to take the first one. He's in the partnership with us. And so when we're seen as a team and not as a set of individuals out trying to set a course, then I think we find ways to live with one another and support one another better.
All right, y'all. I mean, I'm sure y'all have more questions, and unfortunately, we can't get to all of them today. I do want to ensure that Melissa, you and Isaiah can give us, because y'all have dropped so many gems and best practices for us to carry with us in our work. As I'm thinking about Boulder Together and where do we go off once we get out this Zoom, once we leave from We Give Summit, y'all, what does that future of our collective action and renewed civic engagement for our democracy look like for you all? And I know that's a deep question, but if y'all could, mic drop us on our way out, that'd be great. What does that future of collective action and renewed civic engagement for our democracy looks like?
Well, I will share one last thing because I do want to get in this quick list of some policy change that's happened in Michigan. So I'm going to celebrate a victory while answering this question, because I believe that everyone in the chat has been kind of mentioning, like, is it okay to get tired? And is it okay to step back? And one of the things that I really love about working with giving circles, especially on political things, is that it is tiring. It does make you exhausted. And there are no off years. There are odd years and even years, but there's no off years. And we have giving circles that have been working on Michigan with us for 6 years. And they also raise resources in those odd years because they know those are the ones that help retain staff and help recruitment and help build something. So people just keep going, but doing it together makes it possible for someone to step back, for someone to have 6 months of needing to take care of something with their health or something with their kids or with their families or with their job. And when there are other people there to step forward, we absolutely kind of get that rest that we need and that sustained feeling of engagement. So I think doing something collectively is absolutely the way to move forward and to be able to keep going. And I also just want to say that, one of the things that really does keep us going, I'll be honest, are some of the wins and the changes. And there's absolutely a virtuous cycle, at least in politics, with this, because when we are able to elect new majorities that are able to pass policies that change lives, they are more electable next time. They can absolutely, win their seats back and hopefully hold these majorities. And we have watched just in the first session of this new majority in Lansing, we have watched them safeguard LGBTQ+ rights. We have watched them protect abortion access in Michigan. We have watched them restore workers' power to unionize. And we have watched them not just send thoughts and prayers after that Michigan State shooting, but actually pass gun safety legislation in Lansing. So when we shift majorities in state capitals, policies change quickly. And the deeper those majorities can get, the further those policies can go. And the more voice, the louder voice, the more heard voice those constituents have. So I think that doing this together is what keeps us going. And after this whole summit, I think we'll all have that feeling and we'll all have that will and that desire to connect. And I encourage that. I encourage anyone who wants to connect with me to do it. I'm into it. I am also an introvert. I need 15 to 20 minutes between Zooms too. I'm going to say it, but I am here for all that energy and all that connection because it is absolutely how we keep things moving forward.
Aisha, I knew I should have gone before Melissa.
Now
I have to. Oh man. So one, I think the future is a future where we're together. And together is going to mean that it's a place where we all leave equally disappointed, but we know that the direction is an inclusive direction. And I think that's the future. The isms that plague our community, quite frankly, or the institutionalized lovelessness that plagues our community is really the problem. So I think we need to acknowledge that there's a love problem that exists in our communities, and we need to figure out how we address the love problem. And I think our future where we've addressed that is a brighter future for everyone, because in that we understand the game that we're playing and the trade-offs that people have to make. I often talk about this idea of another game that I play, and a last analogy, I guess, Sonic the Hedgehog. If anyone's played Sonic the Hedgehog, you know, and if you haven't played Sonic the Hedgehog, don't talk about us older folks on the call. But in Sonic the Hedgehog, you can die a couple of ways where you're in the fight, right? You can jump off of a cliff, or you can run into a spike. And the goal of the game is to go through all of the boards and finish them all. But again, if you jump off a cliff, you die. And if you run into a spike, you die. What we know is the work that we're doing right now, the tough work we're leaning into, we're going to run into some spikes. When you start coming up against the isms that exist in our community, you're going to run into a spike. You start talking about disparities and the folks that are marginalized, you're going to run into a spike. So what do you do in Sonic in order to run into a spike and still live? You collect rings. Like, you collect these rings. The more rings you collect, the more spikes you can run into and continue doing the game, continue the fight, even though you're tired, to Myra's earlier point in the chat. So our job is to understand the game that other folks are playing. When these politicians are navigating our communities and collecting social capital rings, don't get mad at them for visiting a church. We tend to beat people up when they do it. Don't get mad at them when they go to the farmer's market and they kiss hands and they shake hands and they kiss babies, right? They have to develop those rings. That way, when they show up in their spaces, on their booth, they can show up for us in ways that allow them to not be compromised, because they're running into spikes for us. And so when you realize, one, it's not us versus them. Two, we got to position them to represent for us. How do we create spaces where they can collect the social capital rings that are necessary for them to lean into the tough issues? How do we support them in those spaces? And so, again, I think a future where we've acknowledged that love is the problem, and how do we love people in ways that allow them to show up as their 100% full self. We talked about the diversity that exists in the state capitol right now in Michigan. How do we support folks in those spaces? That way they don't have to assimilate or change who they are in order to be in those spaces. And that requires that we wrap our arms around them. So it's more, I would say, more than a wraparound, is more integrated set of supports that we're offering those leaders. That way they can show up as their full authentic selves. And so I'm thankful for the opportunity to be here, Taisha. I'm so sad that I had to follow Melissa on that last one, because, man, you were
No, it's all, I wish we
yeah.
had more time. We got to give more time, and we give Summit 2024. No, this was fantastic. Isaiah, Melissa, and Madeline, I agree. Isaiah, I want to meet your mom. Melissa, you too. No, this has been fantastic. Honestly, the conversation, thank y'all so much for proving to us individually and collectively what we can achieve together. And just thank you both for just being bright lights, advocating for us in our communities in Michigan and beyond, y'all, for this fight towards our freedom and our democracy. And I truly personally have taken in some tips and things that I'm taking back, carrying me back here to Dallas. As Octavia Butler says, y'all, we do not have to wait for anything at all. All we have to do is start. And so today's conversation is a perfect way with that. No one is coming to save us, but we can guide it ourselves. Like Melissa said, as long as we do it together. Isaiah, let's center on love. We definitely do got to address that love issue. But collective giving, y'all, is a space for us to do all those things. So thank you all so much for joining us. Let's continue to connect with the panelists, and Kyson, I'll turn it back over to you to close us on out. Sorry, I went over a little bit over time, y'all.
No, great. Thank you to everyone being here, especially Isaiah, Melissa, Ty, for igniting this whole room. The former gamer in me is like, my heart's filled with the Sonic reference, but we really appreciate all the knowledge and the powerful analogies that you've shared. Before we wrap up, please remember to answer our 2-question poll before exiting this meeting. It should just be launched right now. You can also find a recording of this session on your agenda in the next few days. And then drum roll for the winner of today's raffle is Ming Liang. So congratulations, Ming. We'll be following up with you over email in the coming days to confirm your book of choice and your mailing details. So congratulations again. And then thank you all for joining us. We really look forward to seeing you in some more sessions. The next one we have is actually a really juicy topic as well. Advancing Equity Through Large Unrestricted Gifts, a study of Mackenzie Scott's giving. So if you're interested in that, please join us at the top of the hour at 2 p.m. Eastern, and we'll see you there. But thank you, Agon. Bye.